مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. محمد سيد الكونين والثقلين، محمد سيد الكونين والثقلين والفريقين من عرب ومن عجم. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. مولاي صل وسلم.
الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وآله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه المنتجبين. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I will try and make this as light-hearted as possible because this can send even the nocturnal animals to sleep. And today we'll be dealing with many definitions, and tomorrow hopefully we'll be coming to the meaty part of our discussions. The terms Tqlid, Ijtihad, Taklif, or Taklif, Ijtihad and Taqlid are all associated with what we understand in Islam as ahkam, or the regulations within Islam, or the regulatory system within Islam. Taklif is to do with the placing of the burden of law, requirements, do's and don'ts. Ijtihad is a process, as we will go through in a little while, of inferring through a particular method what these laws, regulations are. And taqlid is imitation or reference to one who has inferred and deduced these laws from its relevant sources. Now when we talk about, and this is just a prelude, the existential framework, what we mean is existence as it stands within itself. This is what we call, I'm going to use this word, ontology, how things are. As far as we are concerned, I'm just going to give a prelude into what we mean by existential framework, how things are. As far as me and you are concerned, what we see, feel, understand is our existence. Nothing more, nothing less. Nothing other than our existence can be a yardstick which is firm, that can be upheld for any form of meaningful argumentation. So now if we examine existence generally, we see that existence is evolutionary. It is always moving from weakness into strength. It is always unfolding itself. Now, whether the Big Bang model is accurate or inaccurate, we know there has been a point of beginning. The fact that today we have concluded that the universe is expanding, we can infer from that very adequately that it has begun from a point of singularity. From a very small point, it has come so far. Now, whether that model is accurate in the sense that there was nothing before it, or whether a black hole is spewing matter into this point of singularity and bringing it out into whatever it is becoming, doesn't concern us. All we need to know is that existence is constantly evolving. Now, we don't need to think too far. A seed, as soon as it's planted, provided that the physical conditions are proper, will sprout and begin its unidirectional journey towards a tree and a fruit-bearing tree, and will procreate. Similarly, an embryo conceived within the womb will become a fetus, a little baby, child, a young adult, a moral person, a spiritual person, and so on and so forth. The galaxies, the solar system, whatever we have, it is following that particular law of existence, which is that it is going from weakness into strength. Now, whether the strength is within itself potentially or is being supplied from other place, that is irrelevant for us. In the process of this evolution, which is the sole property of existence as we understand, yes, we find many other facets that I want to use in order to place these terms in a new, these terms afresh. In the process of this evolution, we find other properties. What are these? We find relativity. We find that things are evolving at different rates. And this relativity coexists, and this leads to plurality, coexistence of plurality, and all of them following that salient, one unidirectional trend of realizing themselves and growing, going from weakness into strength. Now this brings in further two phenomenal concepts from existence. One is no finality. There is no finality. Nothing can be deemed to be final. Everything is as it is right now. In the next moment, it is something else altogether, or potentially or possibly can be something else. Now, I'm going to be burdening us with certain terms. This no finality brings about what I call evolutionary flux. We can never know anything as it is, because nothing is as it is for 2 moments. If something was as it is within itself, then we can know it. But nothing is as it is for 2 moments. So therefore, we can never know anything accurately beyond that moment. We can only know something to the level to which it is at that point. But if in itself it is always evolving, then we can never know it absolutely as it is, because it is not as it is. Yes? And this is what I call evolutionary flux. For religion to be successful, it has to be based on existence, as we will explain tomorrow. Now, when we come to ahkam, these ahkam, if they have a purpose within themselves, then the only purpose they can have is to allow human beings to complete themselves. That's about all. And that is the function that they serve. And if that is the function that they serve, then they have to have the nature of the existence of human beings. They have to be able to fluctuate like the human being. There is no finality in those ahkam. And therefore, the process of inference has to reflect this evolutionary flux, relativity, plurality of the human being's existence. Now you might ask that you might be asking this question that I was just talking about existence, and how do I bring about the flux and the plurality of human beings? Because human beings are as existent as existence is. And even though we have this ability to reason, to understand beyond other life forms on this earth, but everything that we do, everything that we perceive in the way we understand rights and wrongs is rooted within our existence, because there's nothing beyond that existence of ours. So therefore, everything to do with human beings has to again fall in line with the properties of existence. So if these ahkams are placed to assist human beings in their evolutionary trend, then the ahkam themselves have to be in a constant state of flux. I'm not going to discuss the theory of form and essence as we did in LA. Please, for those of you who are interested, you can refer to those lectures. Now, if the ahkam are in the state of flux, then taqlid, the placing of this ahkam upon human individual, and individuals also has to be in a state of flux. The method of Ijtihad also has to take in account the state of evolution and no finality. Taqlid, the discharge of or adequate discharge of duty, as we will come to it right now, has to always also be in line with this evolutionary nature, going from weakness into strength, incompetency into competency. Now the Quran has stated, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not burden a soul save to the extent of its ability. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very particular in the way that He speaks within the Quran. Ability and taklif are proportionate to each other. There cannot be taklif beyond ability. If abilities are always fluctuating, then taklif is always fluctuating, which means ahkam are always fluctuating. Now, just on that note, if a girl becomes mature through puberty, then she is vested with certain obligations and responsibilities. But does that mean that she is psychologically also mature to be able to bear responsibilities that are of the psychological nature? Or let us give the example of a psychopath. A psychopath does not feel empathy to the extent to which a non-psychopath feels. Now the responsibility, therefore, of the psychopath of sin, is it the same as the responsibility of a non-psychopath? I'm not saying a normal person, I'm saying a non-psychopath, just being very careful. Does it mean that it is the same thing? Or is it different? For example, in America, we had a case in which a psychopath guilty of murder was not executed. He was deemed as a person with diminished responsibility. That is in the physical law court. But in terms of spirituality and sin, isn't sin in accordance with the intention of the sinner? Just as the Prophet has stated that إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that the deeds are in accordance with intentions, so the deed's caliber of a deed is contingent not upon the physical inaction and the performance of that deed, but rather the attitude through which the deed is conducted. I ask in the reverse. The gravity of the crime and the sin that it procures, is it or is it not in accordance with the attitude of the sinner and the aptitude of the one who commits the crime? So here is a question. If a girl becomes baligh at whatever age the fiqh determines it, does she also get vested with responsibility which is non-physical? Let's say she is responsible for fasting, for example, or praying. But is she also responsible for conducting her own affairs in every walk of life, contracting on her behalf, investing on her behalf, so on and so forth? Or is the interpretation of the verse, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, in line with the existential property of evolution? What this means is, in the process of evolution, we find gradation. There are grades. People become able to do something and are still incapable of doing other things. And then they become capable of doing other things, and yet there are higher level things that they are not capable of. But then that also brings about a problem of uniformity. Will we have uniformity or not? And these are the things we will discuss. So for today, with this little prelude, the aim of this discussion will be to shift interpretation of the term taklif from its legal normative understanding to an existential understanding which is in line with the evolutionary and gradational which is both evolutionary and gradational in essence, in line with the general properties of existence. Now, when we say to shift the meaning of taklif from its legal normative understanding, what we mean by legal normative understanding is what we get in jurisprudence. That we need to do this, we can't do this, we are burdened with this responsibility, this is wajib, this is haram, so on and so forth. If you commit this crime, no matter at what age, you are liable for punishment. That is the normative legal understanding. To shift it from that to an existential understanding, which is evolutionary and gradational. What does that mean? That as the capability comes, that is when the responsibility will also come. And certain capabilities arrive before other capabilities. And therefore, the whole idea of responsibility is gradational. There are certain responsibility at one age and certain responsibility at another age, or in one context and in other contexts. Through it, we will critique the current traditional model of ijtihad, or the process of inference. What do we mean by ijtihad? We mean, as we will explain in a little while, the whole method of deriving the law from its source, and the existing method of adequate discharge of duty through imitation or taqlid. So by shifting the meaning of taklif from its legal normative meaning to an evolutionary, within the evolutionary framework, to an existential meaning, what we will do is we will also examine ijtihad and critique it, taqlid and critique it, and set up a new model that is in line with the salient properties of existence. Now, before we go there, we need to cover a lot of ground as to what do these things mean within the current traditional framework, because before we critique anything, we need to know what they actually mean. So this is what we will endeavor to do today, and just gesture at the problems that are there, and tomorrow look into the alternative with a fuller critique. The definition of taklif within the traditional framework, as derived from Allama Hilli, from his commentary on Tusi's work of Tajrid al-I'tiqad, he says, "At-taklif ma'khud min al-kulfa," that the word taklif comes from kulfa, burdening, or something that is arduous. وَهِيَ al-mashaqqa, and that is something which is arduous, difficult. And its definition is that that is the intent of the one whose obedience is obligatory, in a way that he initiates that intention with informing us sufficiently that that is what his intention is. So taklif, and the mystics have also taken this meaning, like Rumi, that taklif means to burden a soul with something that is difficult and that is inconsistent with their natural disposition of wanting ease. So responsibility is only responsibility because it is difficult and arduous. This is the meaning of taklif traditionally. So taklif is from God because His obedience is obligatory upon everyone else. In the traditional setup, the age of taklif is 9 and 13 or 14 respectively, for girls and for boys. The people who are exempted according to what we call the hadith al-raf or raf al-qalam, when the Prophet said that the pen of responsibility is lifted from 9 extensions. Amongst them are sabi, a child, until they become mature or reach the age of puberty, and the other one is an insane person until they come out of their state of insanity. So I suppose most of us are excluded from taklif altogether. Yeah. At least the Maulanas are. Who in their right mind would want to be a Maulana in the first place. Now here the problem is that there is a cutoff point of 9 and 13. And that is a cutoff point for every type of responsibility. We see two problems here. Neither has the age 9 fluctuated within the traditional setup from the time of the Prophet till now. Despite the fact that Imam Sadiq moved the age of puberty for girls to 13 at times, to 12 at times, to 10 at times. He demonstrated this fluctuation in line with the evolutionary trend. That's the first thing. Second thing, we don't see any gradation in different taklifs. At the age of 9, a girl is responsible for everything that the adult is responsible for, without any exception. So she has to perform her prayers, her fast, she can take control of her wealth, she can get married, and she can have babies, be responsible for the household. There is one cutoff point, and everything becomes a responsibility at that particular point. So we don't see any evolutionary change within the age of responsibility, nor do we see any gradation in the types of responsibilities. So this is the first thing that is inconsistent with what we have been saying above as to the in relation to the existential framework, which is evolutionary, there is no finality, and it is gradational. If we were to say it is no final, there will be no reason to say there is a cutoff point of 9. If we were to say that it is gradational, then there is no reason to say that every form of taklif becomes incumbent at a particular set given time without any exception. Yes. As I said, then we will just point these things out today and tomorrow go out to resolve them. So now, taklif brings about every form of responsibility. This responsibility is in the form of ahkam, or the regulations. So what is the definition of ahkam within the traditional setup? Here we can find Baqar as-Sadar's text. Ahkam is the issuance, is the sharia that is issued from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to arrange the life of mankind. So regulations are the sharia, or regulations is the sharia given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to regulate the life of human beings. In this definition again, we don't find any sense of purpose. Why has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala given ahkam as sharia to organize human life? Again, it is in conflict with the existential principles which state that everything is moving from a state of weakness into strength. Because if ahkam are taken like this, then ahkam have no other purpose but formalistically arranging the life of human being, especially if there is finality to it, they may not yield at all and there is no sense of purpose. The sense of purpose is with evolution, flow from weakness to strength, and the whole process of self-realization. These ahkam are further divided, and we need to go through this into wajib, haram, mustahab, makruh, and we can also throw in the mubah, although it is highly unlikely that we can call anything apart from wajib and haram as real laws, yes? Because these are the extremes for which the system guarantees reward and punishment, or acceptability and non-acceptability. But let us put all of them together and lump them together. So wajib, haram, mustahab, makruh, and mubah. Such as what? We have further categorizations. Aini, the laws that are incumbent upon every individual or groups of individuals without exception. Or kifai, the sufficient obligation that they are incumbent upon all, but if performed by some in whom there is sufficiency, then they are not wajib or wajib on incumbent upon others. Now these can be individual or they can be in collective capacities. Individual like prayers, fasting, paying tax. Collective such as the Friday prayers, the Eid prayers, the establishing of a functioning economy, let us say. Jihad, self-defense, so on and so forth. And then there's a further categorization of ahkam, which again gives us a sense of really what is happening in there, but it's never really made it. These are known as taklifi and wada'i. Taklifi, in English,
if you leave me with the power of speech, I will.
Normative regulations mean. Normative regulations mean that as soon as that age is reached, which is beyond an individual's control, and as soon as the individual is sane, there are certain obligations that relate to them independently and directly. Such as what? That a girl of 9 will fast, will pray, can get married, can take control of her assets, so on and so forth. And then there are wada'i, which are known as circumstantial. That whenever an individual chooses certain situation for themselves or circumstance for themselves, then they themselves, through their own choice, bring about laws and responsibility upon themselves. So if a man marries, then it becomes obligatory upon them to provide for their wives. Obligation to provide for the wife with taklifi, but it is only there if a person chooses to get married. And that is what makes it circumstantial. So circumstantial law is one that has within its heart the taklifi law. But the circumstance, that situation is chosen by the individual. So these are the sort of categories of the broad categories of law. What is the range of law? The range of law is that it covers every single aspect of human life, from devotion to consumables, contract law, witnessing in the court, capital punishment, family law, whatever else we can think of that is effective within human life is embraced by the system of law. Now here, there's an underlying assumption within the jurist's mind that either there is an actual law which is immutable within the knowledge of God, or that God has informed us of it. This is the thing then that brings about this notion of a law being a fixed law. And therefore, that fixed law becomes incumbent upon one and all at a particular cutoff point. So that is the assumption that makes this particular sort of thought as rigid as it is. Now, what is fiqh? We are just defining right now. What is fiqh? Again, if we go to the definition of Bakr al-Sadr, it is the whole process of inference of the regulation from its sources. The sources can be whatever they are, the Book of God, the Sunnah of the Prophet, so on and so forth, consensus, intellect. But fiqh is the process of inferring that law. Now, ijtihad, therefore, is that method that the faqih uses in inferring the law from its sources. So what is ijtihad in the modern understanding? Ijtihad is the exertion of a jurist or a legist within the sources of law to derive and infer the ahkam. But this is largely based on two things. Ijtihad, the whole of the ijtihad process. Now this is very, very important for us to remember, and I'll recap. One, a very pedantic appreciation of the text that is derived from its sources. What does this text mean at an apparent level? So if the Prophet has said, for example, that when you distance yourself from your town to the extent that you cannot hear the adhan or see the walls of the town, then break your prayers. If you're intending to go out on a journey, a day's journey. The pedantic appreciation would mean that we try and understand, well, what is the meaning of the cutoff point where we can't hear adhan or we can't see the walls? And what if there is a conflict between the two? That I can hear the adhan but I can't see the walls, or I can see the walls and I can't hear the adhan. What am I supposed to do at that point? What is the apparent meaning of the Prophet? So the ijtihad is based on a understanding of the text in its apparent capacity. That's the first thing. And resolving the conflict that occurs within two texts that are at loggerheads with each other. So for example, the Prophet said, start your fast when you see the moon and end your fast when you see the moon. Yes? So obviously he said that to the people of Medina. When he was going away, they said, well, what are we supposed to do? We always did what you did. And he said, well, do this. Start when you see the moon and end when you see the moon. And then Imam Sadiq Salamullah alayhi came and he said, pray with the people of Qibla, do Eid with the people of Qibla, do Eid with the people of La ilaha illallah, do Eid with the people of Salah. Now here is a conflict. What do you do between these two texts? The faqih will retain the apparent meaning and try and resolve the conflict. The faqih in the ijtihadi method, this is the first point, does not subscribe to the theory of evolution. So he will not say that the Prophet was in one context, Imam Sadiq was in another context. And hence, there is no real conflict between the two. It can be seen differently. The faqih in his methodology of ijtihad will state simply that the apparent meaning has to retain its force and somehow it has to reconcile. Yes? And the second basis of ijtihad is that whatever is derived from it is universally applicable and it is permanent. So it doesn't take into consideration relativity in the world, and it doesn't take into consideration the evolution of the individuals. What does that mean? So for example, the faqih says that the Prophet's hadith, that if a lady becomes 9, because in those days they were women at the age of 9. So if a woman reaches the age of 9, responsibility becomes incumbent upon her. Yes? So if Imam Sadiq were to say it is the age of 13, the faqih will not be able to reconcile this and say this is in a vertical evolutionary trend. Things had become different at that time, or there is gradation there. The faqih will see this as a conflict, and they would resolve this conflict by saying that one is absolute, the other one is a recommendation, or that one is true, the other one was stated in taqiyya, or that we cannot reconcile, so we throw away both of them and we retain the one, the ijma of the Muslims, that is on the age of 9, for example. So the faqih will not say that there is an evolutionary trend here, first thing. Two, when they say it is, it's point number 2, that it is universal, they will not be able to see at the horizontal level relativity. That in Africa, women do have babies at the age of 10. In the West, they don't menstruate till the age of 14. So there is a natural relativity. They will not see that. It is universally applicable to all regions in the world at the same time. And 2, they are permanent. So no evolution vertically and no relativity horizontally. What is Taqlid? Reference to the most learned among those who know in the process of discharge of duty. Now, in terms of the definitions that we have, it's important that we take these definitions. Amongst the Sunnis and the Shia, we have this definition of Taqlid, taking of the views of another without seeking evidence from the other, or following or acting in accordance with the view of another without seeking any proof from the other. Fakhruddin Razi, and the great Fakhruddin Razi had stated this, and Allama al-Hilli. According to Yazdi's definition, committing oneself to following the views of another. He brings in the state of commitment. Sabzwari and others see no real difference between the two. But anyway, with further sort of discussions on the semantic of Taqlid, people like Sabzwari argue that qallada comes from the root word of placing a yoke in somebody else's neck. Now this word has been used twice in the Quran in terms of the sacrificial animals that are dragged by the pilgrim during the major pilgrimage. When a person does Hajj al-Qiran, it's one of the 3 forms of Hajj, they would drag the animal with them, and in order to symbolize that animal as a sacrificial animal, they would tie a slipper into the neck of the animal, and that act is known as the act of qallada, to place a collar around somebody else's neck. Now that was a literal meaning. The metaphorical meaning is to place the burden of responsibility upon the neck of another. With further analysis, we find that actually the meaning is twofold. One is that a person offers their neck for the placing of the collar by another. So a learned person is ready to give an opinion, is placing his or her neck, and the one seeking to follow is placing the responsibility upon that neck, and that is known as Taqlid. Upon analysis, we find that Taqlid is squarely in line, and Hui and others agree to this, with its conventional meaning: blind following of another. Blind following of another. Now, what happens here is, before I go and point out the little criticism we have, that Yazdi made a tremendous statement in his Al-Urwa Al-Wuthqa, which set the trend for all those who came after him, which has remained till our time now, 2 odd centuries or plus, yes? And that has become the status quo. What Yazdi states is, in the discharge of duty, a person has to either be a mujtahid or a muqallid. So we are mukallaf, vested with responsibility. Responsibility of what? Of discharging the ahkam. So you've got taklif and we've got ahkam already, yes? The 2 terms we discussed a little while ago. We can either be a muqallid or a mujtahid. If we are mujtahid and do ijtihad, then we are inferring the law from its sources. And we are satisfied that we know what we are doing, yes? If we are muqallid, then we are following somebody who knows how the law is derived from its sources, so that our discharge of duty or taklif, responsibility, is knowledge based. How does he make this argument that these are the only two which are valid options? We are seeing all these three terms lumped together, aren't we? Taklif, mujtahid, ijtihad, muqallid, taqlid, yes? His commentator, I think it's Mohsin al-Hakim, gives this reasoning. Now this is it's a sort of reasoning that you know there is something wrong with it, but you can't put your finger on it. But tomorrow, hopefully, we will put our finger on it. We might just do it today if you smile a bit more. He states that in the wajib, and which includes the acts of devotion, or the preludes to devotion, salah is act of devotion and prelude is wudu, yes? For example, there is a requirement of intention. Intention's essence is to seek proximity through the act to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have we got all of that? So I am praying salah, qurba, ilallah. Yes? Khojasa illallah, which means I'm seeking proximity through this salah to everybody except Allah. But I'm sure the angels understand what we mean, so it's not a real problem. So the intention of qurbatan ilallah, not illallah, how can you make such a claim, he says. If you're a mujtahid, you know what you're doing. You can bet on it that I have inferred this myself, and I know this is what God wants me to do, so I can make the intention, I am doing this qurbatan ilallah. But if you are not doing taqlid, and if you're not a mujtahid and you're not doing taqlid, how can you ever make this intention that I'm praying this salah to seek proximity to God, where you don't know that this is what God requires of you? Are you getting this argument? Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? And we still know there's something drastically wrong with it. There is something terribly wrong with it. Yes? Now, obviously, we want to explore what is wrong with it, and we want to set the other framework in which it does make sense. But today I just want to point out a certain problem with the whole process of imitation and taqlid. You see, taqlid is a blind following of another in discharge of responsibility and duty. But God existentially has created us in a state of weakness so that we may arrive at a state of strength. So the whole process is going from incompetency to competency, isn't it? In every walk of life, we evolve, don't we? By taking responsibility, and we grow through it. So the burden of responsibility is on our shoulders. The whole process, existential process, is that the reliance upon the other is lessened all the time. Yes? As we progress and we evolve. First problem, that it is not falling in line with the existential principle of growth. So the whole of taqlid is based on the law of competency. But incompetency is supposed to change into competency. 2, it doesn't have any gradation. Incompetency is of a variety of types. Incompetency is at an individual level, incompetency at a domestic level, incompetency at the level of a community, incompetency at the level of a state, incompetency in matters of economy, incompetency in our understanding of a political or just social system, commerce and banking, for example. The whole world is always in a state of incompetency, turning into competency, lending itself into further incompetency as complexities develop. Taqlid is a very simplistic notion that you refer to one person in lock, stock and barrel of our want of life or the problems of life. That's the first thing. The problem too with Taqlid is, and as we'll develop this tomorrow, is that it is only looking at a very pedantic appreciation of the text. Whereas the level of need is rooted within our state of existence. So for example, if we want to understand the issue of organ donation, let us say, the mujtahid will merely look at what? The appreciation of life and death, sanctity of a Muslim and cutting up Muslim and whether the organs can be given, or weighing up the pros of giving organs and the cons of not giving for the society, for medical research, for giving life to the other. These are the only things they would look at. But the central concern will be the sacredness of life. So now the mujtahid, if they say that yes, you can donate organs, which many of them say, then a lot of these organs have to be extracted prior to death. But killing and euthanasia is haram because life is sacred. However, extraction of those organs would definitely lead to death. So we can see that they cannot resolve such problems. They are not available from pedantic interpretation of text. Ijtihad, therefore, has to be based on something far more. It's a very simplistic model. So there are many flaws within this model in terms of the existential framework. In addition, when we come to the examination of the whole issue of reference to one who knows, we will also understand that what conflicts with our intuition, we cannot place on somebody else's neck and say we are absolved of responsibility. So for example, if the faqih's methodology, pedantic methodology says that you do 3 Eids, then we know that is highly inconsistent with social Islam. I mean, isn't it obvious? We raise our hands and we say, هَذَا الْيَوْمِ الَّذِي جَعَلْتَهُ لِلْمُسْلِمِينَ عِيدًا, this day that you have made Eid for the Muslimin. Right? We know when we are reading it, we know we are lying to God, right? Because He hasn't made that day Eid for the Muslimin, He's made it Eid for me and you only. The rest of them are doing it tomorrow and others day after. And God knows what the others are doing, like us guys in Birmingham. It's a month after you guys finish yours. All the 1 days that have been accumulating for the last 1,400 years. So here, we know that it is conflicting with our better understanding. Can we say, what the heck, man? He's going to take the responsibility, I'm going to do it tomorrow. Or I'm going to do it 3 days after. Intuitively, we know it's not possible. It is conflicting. Can we shed responsibility upon other? Or the fatwas based on the former paradigm of the land of Muslims and the land of disbelievers who are antagonizing the Muslims. Based on that paradigm, there were laws that we can go into the land of the antagonizers and steal from them in order to weaken them. Yes? So that they cannot mount an offensive against the Muslims. If somebody is still operating in that paradigm and they say that you can go to the UK and steal from your neighbor, so we say, well, I know I shouldn't be doing it, but the responsibility is his and I'll go and do it. And we have this conflict. What do you do at that point? And we know that it's inaccurate. Yes? Or, and I always give this because it always wins me a lot of support and it ensures that I come back, that when a woman says, I've seen the moon, and we say, nah, bring another woman with you. And we know she has created a craft that can land us on Mars. She has that much ability. So we know at those points that when there is conflict against our better judgment, we cannot place responsibility on another. So these are just some of the problems that we have pointed, and we've just been trying to gesture and indicate and flirting with the idea of a greater model, which we inshallah want to talk about tomorrow. Abdul Aziz Bhai asked me to speak just briefly about the need for the Muslims to be one. Now, I'm just saying, it is a great shame that we have to come to this position where we have to talk about it. It just shows how much we have regressed. The Prophet of Islam came in accordance with those beautiful principles of existence. What did he do? He came to those warring Arabs, yes, immoral people, and he made them into a League of Nations. Imagine. The death toll by the time he left this world, after having, I've read somewhere, 1 million square miles of land, was just over 300 people. Just over 300 people had died, and he had forged such a huge unity. He did not want to remove their differences. He allowed them their differences because plurality is an essential facet of existence. He appreciated that. He created his Ummah in Medina out of Muslims, Jews, some Christians, maybe some Sabians, and the pagans who might have been somewhat Hanafis. And as many historians have commented, he allowed them to coexist with each other as one ummah. He believed in pluralism. He allowed them to resolve their differences through their tribal customs and laws. Yes, he was liberal in that way. 2, look at the ethos of the Quran and the way the Quran talks about things. It talks about the people who believe, the Jews, the Christians, and the Sabians, all of them receiving salvation provided they believe in God, the last day, and do righteous deeds. It says, Ta'alu, to the people of the book, Ta'alu la kalimatin sawain baynana wa baynakum. Come to that word which is equal between us and between you, that we will not worship other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wa la nattakhidhu ba'duna ba'dan arbaban min dunillah. And some of us will not take others as lords other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the commentary says, priests. We will not take priests as authorities beyond Allah. And then Allah says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. Seek safety through the rope of Allah altogether. وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, and don't be divided. And look at the verse. وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. And remember the blessing of Allah upon you. إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً, when you were enemies. فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ. And He reconciled and brought love within your hearts. This is what the Quran is saying. Isn't it amazing? And Allah is saying, and this is an insightful verse, I mean all of them are, but look at this one. قُلْ هُوَ الْقَادِرُ عَلَىٰ أَنْ يَبْعَثَ عَلَيْكُمْ عَذَابًا مِنْ فَوْقِكُمْ وَمِنْ تَحْتِ أَرْجُلِكُمْ مِنْ فَوْقِكُمْ أَوْ مِنْ تَحْتِ أَرْجُلِكُمْ أَوْ يَلْبِسَكُمْ شِيَعًا وَيُذِيقُ بَعْضَكُمْ بَأْسَ بَعْضٍ. He is capable of sending chastisement upon you from on top of your heads or from below your feet. He's talking about punishment, chastisement. Look what he says next. Or tear you up into little factions and groups and cause some to taste the evil at the hands of others. Isn't this the state of the Muslims right now? The Prophet simply constructed his Islam on a belief system and minimalistic laws and practice system that gave us our identity. Belief system was what? Wahdaniyah of Allah, Ma'ad, which is Qiyamah, and Nabuwah of the Prophet. That's the whole lock, stock and barrel of the belief system. There is nothing more, nothing less to it. And the system of practice was Salah, Siyam, Hajj, Zakat, yes, and Jihad. That's it. Minimalistic. And He gave us that beautiful identity of being a Muslim. Look at the culture the Prophet set up at Makkah, where you can't distinguish one from another. All of them are one and the same. He's set that culture up deliberately to give us that identity of the Ummah, that you are one. The Quran, when it talks about Allah, every mind has a different interpretation of what Allah is. The Sunni school of thought within themselves are as conflicted as Shias and Sunnis are conflicted amongst each other. And the Shia schools of thought within themselves are as conflicted as Shias and Sunnis are conflicted. So when people say Shias and Sunnis are conflicted theologically in their understanding of God, eschatology, yes, and the nature of imamology and the psychology, also nature of prophetology and imamology, then the Shias' conflict internally are as great as their conflicts with their Sunnis, and the Sunnis' internal conflicts are as great amongst themselves as they are with the Shias. It's amazing. And the Quran doesn't say fold your arms or keep your arms open. The Quran doesn't say Alhamdulillah or say Ameen. Allah in His infinite wisdom has left all of that ambiguous for a reason, right? Because He knows 10 different people will understand things differently. Yes? How foolish is this Muslim who believes such a petty God? Seriously, how foolish is this Muslim who is committing his life to a God who has created 7 billion people? Do you know, this one human brain is worthier than the whole universe put together? The connections in one brain are more complex than the connection between the trillions of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. This is how complex this brain is. By this I mean all of ours, just not mine. Yeah? Although I think my brain is complicated, but all of ours are complex brains. Allah has created such charm, such beauty, and He is so petty, He is so petty that He is saying, from all of you who I have created, I will give salvation only to the Muslims. And within the Muslims, I will only give it to Shias. And from the Shias, only to Ithna Ashris. And from the Ithna Ashris, only to the East African Khojas. And from the East African Khojas, only to people who do Tqlid of one marja. And from them, only to the one who comes from Zanzibar.
I object to that.
You should agree to that. I'm just saying, how petty is this God? I'm just asking a little question here. Do you think that beautiful God, I'll tell you, I'll fall into hell myself for not worshipping a beautiful God, for reducing God to such a petty level. Seriously, I'd fall into hell myself out of embarrassment. That's such a beautiful God, who is not concerned about how we fold our arms or open our arms, who is giving paradise to the Jews and the Christians and the Sabians, and the Muslims are denying paradise to each other. Honestly, you see, the whole intention was that with different interpretations, we have different readings and expressions of Islam, not different sects claiming exclusive rights to the truth. Yes? How? How is that possible? And we really think our God is as petty as me and you. That, if I call Him Allah, I go to heaven. If I call Him God, I go to hell. So if 2 of my children, one calls me Papa and one calls me Daddy, I'll slap one and I'll give sweet to another one. My God, when my child calls me anything, it's the sweetest thing in my ear, no matter what he calls me. If God has vested me with this nature and I'm created in the image of God, imagine how He must be. Ud'u Allah, awidu Rahman, ayyan ma tad'un, falahu al-asma'ul husna. Call Him Allah, call Him Rahman. Whatever you call Him, His are the beautiful names. Call Him Jehovah, call Him Bhagwan, call Him whatever you want to. It is the heart that yearns the real meaning. The word is a mere word. The strength of the word, whether it's Bhagwan or Jehovah, it's created from the intensity of the love that is poured from the heart into that word. If I call Him Khuda, it might be stronger than Allah that somebody else calls. If I call Him Bhagwan, it might be greater than Rahman that somebody else calls Him. Depends with what intensity the lover calls the beloved. If He creates a mother whose heart is filled with flowing love, untarnished, unconditioned, forgiving her children at every point, making every truth into a lie, lie into a truth, in order to safeguard her children. And if that is a ray of the beauty of my Lord, imagine His motherly aspect. And we have reduced that God to this pettiness. In the name of God, the Sunnis and the Shias call each other kafir. My God, what has become of us? How nonsensical is this? Pray together, whether you pray on moor or you pray on carpet, what difference does it make? Allah says when you sacrifice that sacrificial animal at Hajj, its meat and its blood does not come to me. What comes to me is the beauty that is within your heart. These sajdas don't go to Allah, these rukus don't go to Allah. What goes to Allah is me and you. Yes? I will say, if there is one thing we can do for ourselves right now is to actually actively extend our hands to the Muslim community and sort ourselves out. Our house is on fire. From my reading and to best of my understanding, from the 6th Imam till the 11th Imam, were fighting two currents. One was extremism within the Shia flock, where they were claiming divinity for the Imams, and the other one was sectarianism. From the 6th Imam to the 11th Imam, the hadiths are: pray with the Muslims, attend their gatherings, participate in the funeral processions, be truthful to the trust that they entrust you with, so on and so forth. Pray together, imagine. Live together, eat together, attend family gatherings together. This is what the Imams were telling us. I think we need to revert into ourselves and to see and examine our hearts and say, what sort of God are we really worshipping, and what Prophet are we following, and what Imams are we following? I'm going to leave us with one note only. That the Prophet said, Ana wa Ali abawa hadhihi al-ummah. Me and Ali are the two fathers of this ummah. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman never denied the status of Ali ibn Abi Talib. They never denied it. They really never denied it. But at the same time, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman and Ali were 4 Khalifas. It's a historical fact in this order. Yes? The Ahlul Sunnah never deny that Ali, Zahra, Hassan, Hussein are the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet. The hadith of Bukhari and Muslim says it as well. Yes? But you cannot deny that the wives of the Prophet are the family of the Prophet as well. Yes? I think we just need to come out of our arrogance and ego and be true to the truth as it stands. I'm going to stop here and we'll open the floor for questions on the discussion that we have had.